You ready? Let's get into this. I've had the Dji Action2 for a couple of months now. I shot a large amount of content using this when my GoPro Hero 9 on the ship actually broke down. So a large amount of life at sea. The second half of the season was shot purely on this tiny little guy. And it's pretty much served its purpose. It's been a great replacement for my GoPro. But over the last 2 months, I've been in Bombay and I eventually picked up a GoPro Hero 10 Black. And over time, while I've had both of these two cameras in my hands, I've realized that I pretty much have stopped reaching for the Action 2 and I mainly gravitate towards the GoPro Hero 10 Black. There's a couple of reasons for this, and that's exactly why I'm making this video today. It's by no means is a video of me bashing the Dji Action2, but there are a few nitpicks, there are a few reasons why I don't pick it up as often as I used to, especially after I've got my GoPro. But if you're somebody who's considering picking up the Dji Action2, there are a few things that you need to know about which I'm going to be discussing today. The first thing we're going to be covering today is the build quality. Over the last few months, this camera has done fantastically well. It is built like a tank. It doesn't look as rugged as all the other action cameras on the market, and that's kind of true. It probably isn't as rugged as them, but in its own right, for the tiny cube that it is, pretty solid. I can actually go all the way, bite the corners, and I know I'm barely even going to scratch this up. Overall, it's a very well built camera, and the entire system that they've built with mods as well as magnets I think is fantastic. When you hold this in your hand, you're gonna feel like it's a premium device. It has a very Apple-esque feeling to it, if you may. This little guy, this tiny cube, is supercharged. Honestly, look at it. It's super small, but this camera in my hand can actually shoot 1080p at 240 frames per second and 4K at 120 frames per second. Stabilized, it's got a bunch of different shooting modes. It can shoot time lapses and hyperlapses. It has every spec that you would expect a modern day action camera to actually have. I still don't use it as much, and that's basically because of this guy here. A simple reason as to why, it's because of this. This just feels like a more well-rounded, rugged, cinematic action camera, whereas this feels like a really premium piece of jewelry or a really expensive toy that I'm scared of damaging. So the first point is basically with regard to storage and battery life. Now this little camera has a battery on the inside of it, and this entire piece is your main camera module. You can add different mods to it, which you're going to get into in a bit, but this is your main piece. And this has a battery on the inside, and obviously it's not a very large battery considering the size and form factor. There's certain things that you just can't beat, no matter how smart you are. Battery is going to be tiny on the inside, and the capacity is going to be a lot lower than what you get on the market. Now, when you want to use this as a standalone camera, you don't want to carry any mods with you, battery life isn't the greatest. It actually is very little, especially when you're shooting 4K. Now DJI advertises a good amount of battery life, 60 or 70 minutes when you're shooting 1080p and not 4K, and that is the downside to the battery life. And honestly, I get about 35 to 40 minutes of 4K recording on this tiny little guy. The next thing you need to think about is storage, which is basically a primary component. Just like your battery life, your storage is super important. Now, as you guys can see, this is one solid piece. It has no openings on it. The storage inside this tiny little camera is 32 gigabytes, which is definitely not a lot. You're going to need a lot more. But what they don't actually tell you even then is that out of the 32 gigabytes of storage that you have inside this tiny little camera, 10 gigabytes is used for the firmware and basically the software that runs this entire camera. So you're not going to be able to use that, which basically means all you end up with is 22 gigabytes of storage, which in the world of 4K is peanuts. You're barely going to get through your day if you're going to use this as your primary camera for filming and you're out shooting an entire vlog or you're out shooting an entire experience while you're out on an adventure. camera. You're gonna have to take really tiny clips. At the max, you're gonna be able to end up with a montage unless you actually sit down, take the time to transfer your footage off of this to your phone or to your laptop and get this fully cleared out and then restart shooting, which is kind of an inconvenience. I mean, if this is your primary camera of choice, it should get you through the day, or it should have a way to insert an SD card into the main camera module, and that's pretty much non-existent. All you get in the main camera module is 22 gigabytes. So yeah, battery life and storage are major downsides. If you're somebody who's going to be filming a lot, you're probably going to realize it too. Now, talking about battery life and storage, you can add these little guys, which is basically a mod. This is the front screen mod, which basically gives you 2 screens on your camera. There's also another mod, which is the battery mod. These mods have their advantages and they're fantastic in their own right. I absolutely love the design. I love how they're magnetic and they just work. I think it's great. DJI has done a really great job with the form factor when it comes to making the cameras look and feel different. But what you have to keep in mind is this is pretty much the only spare battery you're gonna get. Remember, there are 2 kinds of mods that you can get on the market: the screen mod and a battery mod, which is what I don't have. And the reason why I don't have the battery mod is because it costs $75 as a standalone piece to actually go out and buy it, which is a lot of money, which is pretty crazy in my opinion. When you compare this system to something like this, the batteries on a GoPro can cost you like $7 to $10 depending on whether you buy originals or you buy cheap ones from Amazon. You can also get GoPro's most powerful Enduro battery for $27, which is so much cheaper than $75 or $169. So on that front, this is a major downside. You can add 90 minutes of power to your camera by adding an additional mod to it, but this is pretty much the only piece you're gonna get, because for 99% of the people in the market, you're not going to be spending that much money on accessories. Which brings me to my next point about these mods. These mods are fantastic on a lot of fronts. They give me 2 screens, they give me a USB-C port, give me a micro SD card, and they give me additional microphones, making this entire package a fantastic vlogging experience, a great toy to fidget with. But yeah, it also means that you're pretty much never leaving your house with just this. When you're going out with the DJI Action2 to film, you're always going to need to carry one of these additional mods with you because of the battery life and the storage. But that's not all. You actually can't charge this piece, which is your main camera module, without a mod. As you guys can see, the USB port is here on the mod, which is great, and you can charge both these pieces together as one unit, and that's fantastic. But there may be times when you just want to go out with this and you don't want to carry this, you don't need the additional mics, you just want this as a point of view camera, you want to put it on the lanyard that you get with it, put it on your neck and just go. And if you want to juice up your camera during the day while you're out filming in that mode, point of view scenario, you will pretty much need this so that you can either transfer the battery from here to here, or if you want to charge both of these up, you're going to have to connect the USB-C cable to the mod so that you can charge up your main battery, which according to me is a massive downside. Pretty much kills the purpose of having such a tiny camera in my arsenal. Now, most of the points that I've raised have pretty much been with respect to vloggers and content creators who want to shoot content for Instagram, or they just want to shoot content for TikTok or YouTube. Yeah, all of the issues that I've named have pretty much been with respect to this format of content creation. But there's a lot of people who buy action cameras because they're waterproof and rugged. And honestly speaking, using these cameras underwater has been a fantastic experience. It's been game-changing for the entire industry, because now you don't have to carry these giant mirrorless cameras in massive housings, and it's not inconvenient. You can just carry this little guy. He's waterproof, he can shoot fantastic resolutions and frame rate. But there may be times when you're underwater where you're going to spend the entire day surfing or diving, and you just want to leave this at 4K 60 or 4K 120 and keep recording, and this is going to pretty much die on you in an hour, because again, battery life and storage, and you're going to have to get this along. But then in that situation, this is not waterproof. This little guy over here, any of the mods that you buy, the battery mod or the dual screen mod, is not waterproof. And as an action camera, that's a massive downside, because you not only have a fantastic action camera that's no longer waterproof, you're also cutting the storage and the battery life for your entire day when you're shooting adventure sports at sea into half. You have half the storage and half the battery life on this tiny little thing. You spend all the money that you did for this camera and you go out and buy a waterproof housing which can hold both of these. Then you can frame yourself underwater, get the additional battery life, then this becomes an entire package. So basically, while this modular system is fantastic to look at, feels fantastic, and I can't stop doing that, it is really good to use in a lot of scenarios. When it comes down to being waterproof, which is a baseline requirement of an action camera, this system gets really expensive. The dual screen combo costs more than $500, and then to have to go out and buy a housing for it gets you into a territory of $600. There's a lot of other action cameras that you can buy on the market. There's also a lot of other mirrorless cameras that you can buy on the market for the same price. While they have their downsides compared to the DJI Action 2, there are options, and this system pretty much pushes you to look out for better options because it's not ideal. The choice you have to make. Now, the lens on this camera is a 155-degree field of view, which is wide and it's fantastic for vlogging. It's an f2.8, which I think is great, decent in low light. But when it comes down to the lens, the DJI Osmo Action, which is the original DJI Action camera, is a fantastic camera, and it had something that this camera doesn't, which is a removable lens. This lens is fantastic, but as you guys can see, it's one piece and it's made out of glass. The overall camera is fine. It's made out of metal. I'm not worried about damaging it because it's good. It doesn't get scratched up easily. You're driving through a rough terrain and for some reason your suction mount falls off. This goes face first into the ground. Your lens at that velocity, at that speed, with that impact may get scratched. It's definitely going to crack. No matter how good any company, including Apple, DJI, GoPro, any of the top companies tell you that how good their glass is or how strong their glass is, you have to remember glass at the end of the day is glass and it is going to shatter if you push it far enough. I'm a little worried every time I'm out filming with this that if I drop it, the only other option I have to pack up this tiny little camera and send it to DJI and get this completely replaced, which is a great feature. The fact that DJI will replace your camera for you if you've paid for DJI Care and you've opted for it. Remember, if you're in countries like India where you have zero DJI support, and I don't understand this, we are one of the largest consumers in the world, sending this to DJI is going to be the biggest pain that you could ever have in your life. The non-removable lens cover is a deal breaker. Another reason is pretty much fixable by software, and I think DJI will get on top of this. They had similar issues with the Osmo Action when it first came out, but over the years that camera just got faster and better. It's with respect to turning this camera on. I've hit the button, I'm still waiting, and as you guys can see, the camera is turned on, but the front screen is asleep. The back screen is on. This screen is still asleep. And now that's when this screen actually turned on, which in my opinion is crazy. The whole point of having these tiny action cameras is so that you do not miss a moment. But every time I hit the power button, there is a significant lag between when the camera turns on and is ready to shoot and the second screen that you have attached to it, the screen mod, has an even longer lag before it actually turns on, which according to me is pretty sad because these cameras pretty much replace our mirrorless cameras because I can have it in my pocket, pull it out, never miss a shot. But even with snapshot, I have had moments where it's not as fast and responsive as I would like it to be. Now, I'm pretty sure the processor on the inside of this is really strong. This is probably just a software thing, and the fact that the secondary screen turns on a lot slower is probably because it's modular, so the connection and it just takes time. But I'm pretty sure this can be fixed in firmware. But at this point in time, I've hit the button. Camera has not turned on yet. The back screen just turned on, but the secondary screen has still not turned on, and I'm still waiting for it. As you guys can see, it finally turned on, and there is a good amount of lag. Now, another feature that I really wish this camera had was user preset. The DJI Osmo Action, the original DJI Action camera, had user presets where you could create presets like cinematic mode or vlogging mode like you have on the GoPro, and you could just save the settings that you wanted. So you could go into your user preset depending on how you're using this camera, choose whichever preset and whichever condition you're filming in, and the camera is already set up. DJI pretty much invented presets, so much so that GoPro actually had to copy them. On the Action 2, there are no user presets. You have to use the screen that they provide. You have to choose every setting individually. You have to set up this camera every time before you start shooting with it, which, like I said, again, is fine. If you have the time to stop, set up your camera, take your shots, it's great. But if you're using this as a vlogging camera, you quickly want to shift to 4K 120 frames per second and you want to get buttery smooth slow motion, there's a whole bunch of touchscreen based settings that you have to go through, and you can't have this preset in your camera. That is a massive downside for somebody like me. Now, finally, what I want to tell you guys is all of these points that I've raised today may or may not be deal breakers basis how you use your action cameras, but they are for me. Overall, I love this camera. It has a fantastic field of view. The colors are great. The specs are fantastic. The sensor is larger than the GoPros. I do like the design. I love these magnets. I think it's great. And if you're somebody who doesn't care about any of the things that I've said today, yes, definitely go out and pick up the Action 2. You can shoot a large amount of content on this camera. But if any of the pointers that I've stated to you do make a difference to you, maybe think about them for a minute or two before you actually go out and spend your money on the Action 2. And I'm going to be going through the DJI Action 2 versus the GoPro 10, so definitely stay tuned for that. I'm really excited to be able to go out and shoot that video, and I honestly believe both these cameras, when it comes down to final performance, final image and results that you get from both these cameras, they're going to be very close. I hope this video got you guys some value. If this was Nitin Chawla, thank you for watching. See you next time.